Hey y'all, today we're going to be going over the Tunisian full stitch. And as you can see, it makes kind of a really neat weaved look, a little bit different from what we're used to. But most of the principles of how we're going to complete this stitch are the same. I will be using a Tunisian crochet hook. As you can see, it's one of those extra large ones. For this, you can use either the kind of just long crochet hook if you're doing a shorter project, or especially if you're doing something like a blanket, you can also use one of these Afghan or Tunisian crochet hooks. They have this extender on the end that allows you to just kind of build off of it in width. But we'll be using this. I am using an 8mm crochet hook due to the fact I'm using a bulky size 5 yarn. It does call for a 6.5mm crochet hook on the yarn label, but I find with some of these, it's good to go up a few sizes. So in this case, we're going up 1.5 sizes. It'll just give us kind of a less tight, more flowing texture that we'll get in the end, as compared to if we did something with the 6.5, we might get something a little bit tighter. So we will go ahead and get started with this stitch. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started by making a slip knot. And then we'll go ahead and chain, I don't know, we'll say 15. It doesn't matter with this if you use even or odd. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, all right, 15. And just to check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Perfect. So to start, again, everything tangled up off camera, we will go ahead and just do the standard back pass. So we're going to flip our work over, skip this first back loop, and go through the next one. We'll yarn over and pull through and leave that loop on our hook. We'll keep those scrunched up a little bit on the hook, because if we don't, it starts to get a little harder to get into that next one. Alrighty. And again, we can just count our loops on our hooks to make sure that we've stayed on count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we're going to go ahead, sorry, I think I had said back pass. So that was the standard forward pass. We'll now do the standard back pass. We'll yarn over, pull through just one, and then for the remainder, yarn over and pull through 2 of the loops. we are ready to go ahead and start with the full stitch. So this is going to waver from our general crochet stitch or general Tunisian crochet stitches in that every row is not going to be the same. So between the first and second row, or a 2-row change, we will be moderating what we do slightly. In this first one, we'll be going between our stitches, so we can see those posts right here. We're actually going to be coming between these and not even going through the post at all. So with our 1 stitch on the loop, what we'll do in this very first row is go through this very first kind of gap, yarn over and pull up, and we'll continue on down the row. And when I say that it changes for every 2 rows, it will make sense at the end. So, and again, we're going between in that hole, yarning over and pulling up our loops. All right, and that change is going to come here towards the end. So this is my second to last. I will yarn over and pull up. But then you'll see in my very last, I'm not actually going to go into this gap. I'm going to skip it, come through the end, go through my 2 loops in the end, and pull up. What this is going to do is make sure that we keep straight edges in our project and that we keep 15 loops on the hook, so we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So our count's maintained. For that back pass, it will be just the same as standard. We'll yarn over through 1, and then yarn over for 2, for the rest of our row. And then we will come to our 1 other change. All right, for this second row, the variation is going to be in where we start. In the first row, we started in that very first gap right here. So generally in standard crochet, we would always skip this first one and go through here. For our first row of the Tunisian full, we went right in that first gap. Now for the second row, what we're actually going to do is skip this first gap and go right in the second. And then we'll continue the pattern of going right through those gaps. And then at this very end right here, we are going to actually go through our last gap. And then finally, and it gets a little hard to see, you'll see that we have those 2. We will go ahead and slip behind those and pull up. And again, we should have 15 loops on our hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And this is keeping our count. So to demonstrate, just through the 1, and then through 2 for the rest of this back pass, we'll go ahead and start row 3. which will again be our first gap and not our skip gap. Alrighty, so on this first one, we are going to go through that very first gap, pull up, and continue on down. I'm not sure if it is hard to see, so we are going, if this is a post, we're going between it. We can see our two posts. We're going right in between them. And when I say posts, I mean it's this part that is looped through and connected. So these two are the same part of the loop, and the post is the gap between those. And here, in this case, we'll go through the second to last, but we're going to skip this last hole. You can see our post and the gap, and go through that end. And we're going to start to see our full stitch built out. It is curling a little bit. You just get that with Tunisian, even going up in a crochet hook. Although for this, we only really went up 1.5, so usually you can go up more and kind of battle that tilt. But you can see it's starting to build out. So for row 4, we're going to skip this first gap and again go through the second. Ooh, and then with this one, we went through the skip, so we skipped that first gap on row 4. So we're going to go into the last one. And finally, right on that edge right there, we're going to sneak in and get under our 2 loops at our very edge. And pull over. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And we'll just come back through. Alrighty, and that is our first 4 rows. We'll go ahead and add a few more so that we can see that pattern, and then we can go ahead and chain off. Okay, so as I was adding these rows, I did think of a couple things to note. So of course the easiest way to know that you are following this pattern is by counting the loops on the hook. But if you're doing that, you might find yourself pulling out rows because you miscounted, or maybe you didn't skip the right loop. So, and now we're going to have problems with this yarn, bless. So some of the things that I was thinking about as I'm running through this is, how do we know where to start? So if we are looking at this edge right here, we can kind of get a good idea of what we're going to be doing by what that last row was. So if we look here, we have in every other row, might be harder to see as we go down. So I have this kind of zigzag. So because I have this guy right here, right in that first loop, I know that what I'm going to do for this next row is to go ahead and come right through in my first one. Oh, I might have gotten that wrong. Let's see. Nope, yeah, so it's kind of counterintuitive. So if the row below has a loop right there, go into that very first loop and then continue on. Ooh, and sometimes I get lazy and I get these caught or they get a little bit tighter. So always make sure you're going through your 2 posts. And then because we went through that very first loop, we know that we are going to skip this last one. And then the other thing that might get a little bit hard to recognize is where are we going in at the end. So if we skip this last one and we kind of flip this guy over forward, what we're going to see is those 2 loops we want to sneak into. Once we have them on our hook, we should also be able to confirm, all right, we got a loop on the back as well, so we're in the right place. We can yarn over and pull through. And then again, because this is going to be the most, I don't want to say obvious, but the best way to check, if we have our count, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, we know that we did it correctly. And we will just run back over. So same concept is going to apply for the next row. In that again, and let me pull this. So now when we're looking, so what we're going to see is that, I don't want to say it looks the same. I might be reading into this. So the last one we went into our first loop, and we have, now instead of this gap, we have a post in that first loop. So if you can see it, we have the 2 here, and then we have the post. This is going to tell us that we're going to skip that first gap and go into the second. And we can confirm, because what we'll see again is when we come up, we'll even do 2. We see our pattern continuing. So we have this kind of diamond shaped zigzag. Nobody's bunched, so there wouldn't be 2 posts next to each other and then a post on top on either side of 2. We're going to see that they are still in between. And with that, we're able to confirm, okay, we've kept the pattern. We can continue on with this next row. I think this gets especially helpful for when we have something like if you're making a blanket, you're going to have upwards of 200 loops on the hook, and you're not going to always want to have to go through and count every single row. So same with on the end. Again, if we come over here and we check, what we're going to see is that, all right, we have this post right here. So we can see that our first loop skipped this first gap and went into the second one. That means at the very end, we're going in to that very last gap. And then again, because it gets even tighter, where are we going from here? We're coming to this end, pushing this over, and slipping through that it's almost that braided shape we get. We're grabbing this guy in the back. We have our 2 on the front. And we know that we have completed. And then just 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So we got our 15 on the hook. All right, finally, we can go ahead, come all the way down. And it is time to go ahead and end. So again, looking at this, we have this gap. That's where we're going through. And we're just going to slip it right off. Better if I hold it like this. And of course we run out of yarn, and it's this big old mass of yarn just bunching up and being generally obnoxious. Alrighty, so next gap, yarn over, Lord, falling apart a little bit, and we're going to slip right off. So like a slip stitch, yarn over, right off. And with this one, again, keeping those edges. We know that we went through that very first loop, so we're going to skip this last one and push through that almost kind of side. And voila! We have our Tunisian full stitch. That's curling because, of course, I'm going to start having to research how to avoid this curl because it haunts me. But either way, that is our full stitch. I think the biggest thing with it is just remembering those sides. But once you're able to quickly see the pattern on the edge, I think it gets a lot easier and there will be less ripping out of rows.